Jim Walsh keeps it live and local weekday mornings on Super Talk 1270.
Bis-Man Weekly, we're going to talk about the proposal in Mandan for a 0.75% hike in the sales tax. And I want to get your input as well. I'm talking to you, dear listener. You notice, by the way, I use singular because this is one-on-one communication. Plus, I've seen the ratings. So, number here is 663-1270. Let's get right to it. Back again today. He was here yesterday, and we were talking about your show yesterday, Marlo, your regular show, The Tech Ranch, which airs every Monday at this time. And today, we brought you back because we want to talk to you in your capacity, I guess, as a local businessman in the Mandan area.
Right.
Who is, you definitely have some opinions on this issue. Basically, what we're talking about, and it's going up for referendum. The vote is June 9th.
June 9th.
June the 9th. The proposal is to hike the sales tax by 3/4 of a cent.
Right.
Now, my understanding is you're against this. You're opposed to it.
I am opposed to this, yes.
Okay. The first most obvious question is 3/4 of a penny. Why is that such a big deal?
Well, that's a good question, I guess.
Very good question.
You know, probably the biggest thing is that, you know, and I love our sister city, Bismarck. I love our city of Mandan even more, of course. Do a lot of things for Mandan. And I am not against this project. I think these things are probably needed in our community. I just am against the way it's being funded. You know, I think there are other ways that it can be funded for this. So what it comes down to is that I think if we have a higher sales tax in Mandan than we do in Bismarck, we push our Mandan residents to shop in Bismarck. And that has an overall effect on the sales tax revenue that we bring in now. So my thinking is that, you know, we have a 1% city sales tax just like Bismarck does.
Right.
And if we move to 1 3/4%, I think, you know, we about 25% of our population actually goes to Bismarck every day to work. And if you give them, especially on bigger things, you know, you're driving by a super center someplace or whatever, and you know that there's a built-in discount just because you're in Bismarck, and it's convenient for you to swing in and shop there, you'll do that. I think there's a lot of people in Mandan now that try to shop in Mandan because they want to support our city.
Sure.
But if you can save $1 or $10 or $20, you know, go buy a riding lawnmower, for example, that's going to cost you a couple, $3,000. You know, that $15, $20 that you save, it begets going across the river and buying it. So that's my position on it.
Okay, a little background on this. Where is the money supposed to go? What are they using it for?
So there's a variety of things, and I think I gave you a sheet there.
I have there's some talking points here.
Yeah, it's a sports complex, and I hope I described this well. You know, again, I'm not against the idea of doing this. I'm just against the way we're funding it. So there's a hockey rink, and there'll be 2 sheets of ice, which is needed in our community. Yeah. You know, we have, I guess, the students, and I'm not a hockey player, or a hockey person.
Hockey dad or a hockey
I haven't been to a hockey game in, I bet, 20 or 25 years. So, but I do know that the students who participate, I think they start at like 4:30 in the morning, and it's not unusual for the ice to be used up till 1 a.m. Again, so there's only a few hours every day that it's not being utilized right now. There's so much demand for the ice time. So they have a challenge there, and I get that, and having the second rink would be good. You know, the ability to host tournaments is a good thing, you know, in the Mandan area. It will bring people here and that type of thing. Our track and football field are in great need of repair. In fact, they have canceled our track meets here in Mandan this year because they're unable to host them because the track is in such bad shape. So some of the monies that will be utilized for this will be for building a new track and football field.
Now, I should mention, in the interest of full disclosure, We did attempt to get a couple of folks on the other side to come
We
on
did.
the air to talk about this. Who
Absolutely.
were you trying to get? Do you want to say?
I probably shouldn't say, but people who are involved, in this, they do have a press conference that they're doing at 11 this morning as well.
So that's underway right now.
Right now. About this. So they didn't want to give up anybody from that press conference.
Which is
to come.
perfectly understandable.
Yeah, it's fine. It's fine.
We're not going to gang up on them. If they want to come on the show at a future time, they've got plenty of time to do so.
Absolutely.
They're certainly welcome to.
Absolutely.
I will welcome them with open arms.
Yep. And this isn't about, our discussion today. I would just like to, kind of get the word out about it. I think a lot of people don't understand what's going on with this. And of course, they're doing some education on their side now as well, which is wonderful. I think people need to be informed about this. And I've been wrong before, Jim. Been wrong, all the time, So I may be wrong on my stance with this. But
I've been known to be wrong on a few things from time to time.
But I really do believe that if we give, the edge to Bismarck, I think it has a much more profound effect than us building, a track and football field and hockey rinks in town. I think we give a decided advantage to Bismarck when we're trying to recruit businesses to come to Mandan. And they have an advantage. They already have an advantage going to Bismarck because there's more population there. We give those businesses recruiting even more advantage to go to Bismarck for that. So I think long term it has dramatic effects. And I think the 1% sales tax we have now, the collection of it will drop a little bit simply because of this. So
You were okay. Yeah, I was going to ask if you had done some number crunching on that.
I have actually, and I did a couple informal surveys on Facebook, and again, it's not a scientific poll or whatever. No. I just put the question out there: are you for or against the sales tax increase in Mandan? And I just wanted a yes or no. There was some people that got into a little bit of a debate on it, but it was about a 50-50 on my Facebook page. And in my opinion, if it's a 50-50, we lose. In fact, if it was an 80-20, we lose.
Really?
Because, you think about this. If we have 20% of our population that's now going to go to Bismarck to shop for these things, that is a dramatic impact, okay? So then I did some number crunching, and I said, okay, let's say we lose 5% of sales. Now, I think it'll be higher than that, but I'm just saying that if we lose 5% of sales, that is a $13 million impact to our community in retail sales. And I don't know any business in town who would like to take a $13 million impact to their business or divide that across a couple businesses.
Yeah, I think your challenge here is going to be to show how the math works on this, how it adds up.
Right.
We're talking, and we're going to round it off. Let's say, for the sake of argument, we're talking an extra penny here. We can kind of round it off rather than keep saying, 3/4 of a penny.
Sure.
But let's say, for all practical purposes, we're talking another penny. How's this work? Another penny per dollar? Is that it?
Right,
okay,
exactly.
Another penny per dollar.
Which
doesn't sound like much.
It doesn't.
Although I guess it does add up if you're buying making a major purchase on something.
They figure that a 0.75% increase in sales tax will generate about $1.9 million a year.
Now, what kind of products are affected by this?
Anything that is non-food, basically.
What about things like cars?
Yeah, it does affect cars, but
Really?
I think there's a stopgap of $25.
Okay.
So you can only charge the extra $25 once you get past that certain dollar amount, whatever that would be. So. Yeah, absolutely, it does.
So it's non-food we're talking about.
Right. So, but it affects restaurants. It affects, all of that stuff across the board. So they'll have to, anytime you go out for, any type of, and I would imagine hotels fall in that. I might be wrong with that, but I think they charge a sales tax. Yeah. Well, I think there's a hospitality tax on top of our regular tax is how that works.
I believe there is, yes.
And I think restaurants have that as well. So you'll see a little bit of an increase there as well. And I don't think it'll impact those sales so much. I just really think it impacts that retail side. So
okay. Well, we will definitely talk about this, and I would invite anyone with an opinion one way or the other to call in at 663-1270 as we continue talking about the proposal for the hike in the sales tax. It's coming up for referendum in June in the city of Mandan. How does it affect you? 663-1270. Jim Walsh on Super Talk 1270 and supertalk1270.com with more conversation and your calls coming up.
Right now, 48.
You're never more than a few minutes from a weather update. here on Super Talk 1270.
Jim Walsh and Marlo Anderson were talking about the proposal for a hike in the sales tax for the city of Mandan to cover various proposed projects, which we'll talk about in more detail here. And Marlo is taking the position of opposing the sales tax. And I welcome you and your input at 663-1270. We did try to get some of the folks from the other side on the show. They were just not available.
Right.
In fairness to them, we will be happy to have them on and let them air their position as soon as we can make that arrangement. Yep. Because we've got until, June 9th?
June 9th.
June the 9th is the referendum on the subject.
Yep.
Now, I have to mention something here. You handed me a piece of paper, Marlo. This is a list of talking points from the folks who are apparently in favor of the sales tax.
Well, I guess I don't know
or is it?
If, they're the ones that are putting on the little...
It's what we call an FAQ list.
Yeah, I guess you could say that. And they're going around town trying to educate people on the benefits of having this sports complex in our town.
Okay.
Yes.
The only thing that bothers me about this is the fact that it looks to be a series of talking points in favor of the hike in the sales tax. At least that's how I interpret it.
Sure. And just so people know, I just handed this to Jim as a reason for, something to inform you about what's going on. I had nothing to do with, having you bring this up at all. That's
and
for
what
sure.
bothers me about this is the fact that it's printed on a piece of paper with the letterhead for the Mandan Parks and Recreation Department.
Right.
I mean, are they telling us, is Parks and Rec weighing in on this or not? I don't know.
I don't know either.
But the fact that it's on the letterhead, isn't that kind of a conflict of interest?
I don't know.
I'm asking rhetorically. It just doesn't sit well with me.
Yeah, I got you.
I mean, if these folks, it's one thing if they, as citizens, if the folks who work there, if they want to weigh in and say they're in favor of it because of da-da-da, that's good. But when you put something like this on the letterhead of the government agency you work for, that just, I don't imagine that will sit right with a lot of folks.
There's probably some people that would be taken aback by that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So back to the issue at hand here. We're talking about the fact that we're going to hike. They want to hike the sales tax 3/4 of a penny per dollar. Am I getting? Okay,
That's right.
I want to make sure I get that right. Which is very awkward to say, by the way.
So basically, 75 cents of every $100 that you would spend. Yes.
Yeah. Okay, that's a good way of putting it. Or 0.75 cents per whatever.
Yep.
And the question is how much would this really affect the business in the Mandan area? Products affected would be basically all non-food products.
Right.
Except, I would assume, probably not housing or cars necessarily.
Right. I mean, yeah, you're right. I mean,
because those
any
items
of those
already have a lot of tax heaped upon them for other things.
That's correct. Yeah, there's some exemptions to it, but if you're out shopping, I mean, just think of the shopping experience or the restaurant dining experience. Those are the areas that you're going to run into this 3/4% sales tax.
I mean, I can see it a major purchase if you go somewhere and you buy, say, if you go to one of these outboard shops or the motorsports shops here along the strip and make a major purchase like a small boat or something like that. You're talking a few $100s. I can see where that would add up.
Sure, and just to be fair again, I know that I believe there's a cap of $25, on this. But if all it takes for you is to drive across the river to save $25, a lot of people do that, and
there are people who will do that.
There are people that will do that. There's no doubt. And
my wife is one of them.
And the other thing I think about is, the nice thing about a sales tax is that it's the people that visit our city that help pay for these things. And I get that. I mean, it's not just the local people. It's everybody who comes to the city, so people who travel here from out of town or whatever. But the thing that concerns me is those same exact people, and I'm picking on like farmers and ranchers now, they think nothing of driving into town because they only come every so often, let's say every couple weeks or every month or whatever. They'll drop $1,000 at a store or whatever because they got to stock up for a month.
Yeah.
So what stops them from going across the river and buying their stuff at the exact same store and getting that little bit more of a discount.
Yeah, I remember they
because
used to come in when I worked at Sam's many years ago.
Yep.
They used to come in Sam's and just buy tons and tons of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
Good for them, but
and there's no different here now. I mean, that's just, to you and me, because we live in town, we probably don't go out and buy a lot of stuff at a time. So, if I'm going to run to a super center and spend $20 or $50, there's no way that I'm going to drive, an extra 5 or 10 miles out of my way to do that just to save 10 cents. I'm just not going to do that.
Right.
But, when I'm making a major purchase, or if I'm working in Bismarck and I'm driving back and this is the day every week that I go shopping or whatever, I would probably stop into that store because I have a built-in discount there.
Well, certainly if somebody's driving in from, say, Beulah or up toward Minot or wherever specifically to shop in the Bismarck-Mandan area.
Right.
My feeling is if they're really looking to pinch pennies that much, it's probably not going to be any big deal. They've come this far. They'll
correct.
go the extra 7 or 8 miles up the street to shop in Bismarck.
Yep. So, I mean, it's not going to affect the shopping patterns of a lot of people on the small stuff. I'm just concerned about the big stuff, and a lot of dollars are spent. Even though that might be only 5 or 3% of all purchases. That reach that $1,000 or $2,000 mark or whatever. But the overall money that is spent there, of course, is significant.
And we're talking again to talk about what we're bankrolling here. New facilities. For like hockey tournament facilities, hockey rink with 2. How does that work now? You're saying it's got 2.
It's 2 rinks, I believe.
Oh, it's 2 rinks.
Yeah, it's 2 rinks. Yeah, so they'll have an area like a practice rink, and then they'll actually have the tournament rink, which of course can be used during off hours as well.
Gotcha.
So, yep.
Well, that'd be a nice business to have. It'd be nice to have another skating rink.
Downtown. And hats off to the people that put this project together.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously there's a ton of work that went into this.
Yeah,
almost all of it is volunteer work. These people have put a lot of manpowers, and they're doing this for the good of the city. And again, I love Mandan, and I think this is a wonderful thing. I just don't feel that this is the right mechanism to fund it.
Now, we have to say, in case you're just tuning in, you're listening to Super Talk 1270. Jim Walsh here, along with Marlo Anderson, and we're talking about the proposal for the hike in the sales tax for the city of Mandan to pay for a hockey rink and some other facilities. I will say, again, because, Marlo, you're opposed to it, I kind of lean toward the anti-tax position. I tend to default there, but I'm going to try to stay open-minded on this one. Since today we couldn't get the folks from the other side to come in, we'll get them in the future.
Right.
I will say, my understanding is there is a sunset provision for this, right?
There is a sunset provision. So at the end of paying for the project,
when they pay off the debt.
Yep. The tax does go away. At least I believe it says on the FAQ that you have in front of you that they'll revisit
it says here the
it.
Sunset. There will be a sunset when the debt ends. The sunset is projected to be 21 years, based on the current population and the visitor population, at which time the sales tax would be reevaluated.
Yep.
And for the Mandan Sports Complex, we're talking about $22 million. What other viable ways are there to fund something like this?
Well, this would be my proposal with this. We've had about $1.5 million increase in our sales tax revenue in Mandan over the last 6 years. So what I would like to see, and I expect that to go up. I mean, I expect that, as our city grows, and even though oil has slowed down a little bit, I do anticipate that we will still have growth here. What I would like to see is maybe a cap put on the revenues that are brought in. And so last year, let's say it was $2.8 million that was brought in with the 1% sales tax. Okay. In that breakdown, and I think I wrote that down on that sheet that you have there. If you can understand my scribbling in the lower left-hand side right there.
Yeah, you used to work in the pharmacy.
Okay, so I think 40% goes to property tax reduction.
40%, correct.
Okay, 29% goes to...
economic development.
Okay, 27% to...
street water, and water.
Yep.
Okay.
And then I think 4% goes to debt reduction.
Debt reduction,
okay.
Right.
So why couldn't a person, you got that 29% that goes to economic development. Okay. I would consider this an economic development package.
Okay, fair enough.
Why don't we take some of those dollars and move that over to this, and then on top of that, put a cap on, let's say at $1.5 million or $2 million in sales tax revenue that we use for the city.
Okay.
And anything above that gets moved to this project. So between taking that 29%, and you can't take all 29%, we do have some expenses in that economic development area, but maybe you can take 10% or 15% of that.
Okay.
And so that's another, $200,000-$300,000 a year. You have, let's say we put the cap at 1.5 million. That would be another 1.3 million on top of that. So now you're at $1.5 million a year, and you haven't raised our sales tax one penny or one anything. So or three quarters. Yeah.
We're talking $22 million to bankroll everything, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
What about bonds?
Bonds, I suppose, would be a way to go too, but I think there's some issues there because of the debt load that both the Park District and the city itself has right now.
Yeah.
And you can't, you can only have so many bonds or dollars involved in that, and it'd have to be clarified with that, but I believe that's how that works, and because of the high debt load that we have right now, we're not able to issue more bonds to do this.
Is the town of Mandan really large enough to support this kind of sports complex?
I suppose it would be. I guess the biggest thing you have to look at is that if my numbers were to hold true, let's say we had a 5% reduction in sales in our town, okay, that means that we'd have to bring in an additional $250,000 a year in additional revenue because of these to offset the loss that we would have. And I have a hard time understanding how this facility hosting hockey tournaments would actually offset $250,000 a year in retail sales, or $250,000 a week in retail sales.
Now, we do know the hockey club would be contributing about $100,000 per year in rent.
Right.
But that would not necessarily go right to the debt reduction.
I believe that that probably goes. That's exactly right, to the maintenance side. Yeah, and they are also ponying up an additional $1 million for this project too. So they have some skin in the game here as well.
Yeah,
so
that's understandable.
Yep.
Okay, we'll continue on this. If you can hang around, Marlo,
yeah,
we'll
that'd
talk
be great.
a little bit more next few minutes. We're talking about the proposal for a hike in the sales tax for the city of Mandan. How is this going to affect the local economy? Is it worth the effort in order to fund this new sports complex, $22 million sports complex that folks want for the Mandan area? Is it worth it? And we'll continue on the subject. Your calls welcome as well. 663-1270. We'll have this conversation up on the podcast page in the next 24 hours as well, and you'll be able to weigh in online as well. Jim Walsh for Super Talk 1270 with more conversation. Your calls coming up.
Right now, 48.
Get the traffic and weather information you need anytime on Super Talk 1270 and online at supertalk1270.com.
You're commenting on my bumper music. You like this?
You can go back to the other stuff.
Yeah, the Thieving Magpie. And the Clockwork Orange soundtrack.
That's funny.
Tells you how far back I go. All right, Jim Walsh on Super Talk 1270, supertalk1270.com. And we're talking about this proposal for a 3/4 penny sales tax increase for the city of Mandan to pay for this new big $22 million sports facility. Marlo Anderson is here in his capacity as a businessman from Mandan. Marlo being opposed to the hike in the sales tax for reasons which we'll kind of rehash very shortly here. And if you're listening, if you want to weigh in on this, I certainly invite you to do so. I guess two questions here. If you're in Mandan, how do you feel about this? And if you're in Bismarck, is this the kind of thing that you could see affecting your decision to shop for certain items in the Mandan area? I'll put it that way. And the number, 663-1270. I'd like very much to hear from you. The podcast will go up in the next 24 hours, and at that time, you'll be able to weigh in on the website as well at supertalk1270.com. Marlo, tell us what happened recently in Minot. I understand it was a similar proposal was made.
It was a similar proposal.
For a sales tax to fund what?
It was a Park District center. It was $88 million, the center that they're going on up there. And What's interesting about this is it was a 1% city sales tax, and the sales tax would have funded park district operations and paid for constructions of a proposed $88 million Minot Aquatics and Recreation Center. So I don't believe that the full $88 million was for the recreation center. In fact, as I'm reading through the article here, this was to take away from the property tax that the park district puts on and replace the monies that they have come in with a 1% sales tax. So there was more dynamic there. You know, the person who were to vote for this, if you voted yes for it, you would have actually gotten rid of that property tax that you have on your home or what have you, that the park district levies for that. And it's interesting. It went down to a 2-1 defeat, and this was just a couple days ago.
Really?
So I would think that with the getting rid of the property tax, that people would have actually voted more in favor of this. But I'm looking at the article here, which is in the Minot Daily News, and a lot of the polling that they did afterwards is people that they were talking to, people were concerned about the possibility of losing the Canadian dollars that come to Minot. You know, that tourism effect, because the Canadians do come to Minot an awful lot.
I'd be interested in seeing some of the research behind that.
That would be interesting.
If there was any. Again, the question is, based on precedent, I guess, and other communities that have done the same thing, how much of an effect can we expect it to really have? I don't know.
And, you know, you can go on the other side. I know that both Dickinson and Williston have added a penny sales tax on their side to build community centers. You know, similar to what we're kind of talking about here, maybe not so specific to like a hockey rink and football and track field that we're talking about here. But those proposals went through, and they do have beautiful facilities in both of those towns because of that. But the difference being, of course, is that in Dickinson and in Williston, they're far enough removed from other cities that adding a 1 penny sales tax doesn't have a great impact on the sales in the retail sales in the town. You just don't have to go across the river to go shopping for something else.
I see. Okay.
You know, you're not going to drive 100 miles to save 75 cents or $1, you know, in Mandan or Bismarck from Dickinson. You know, it doesn't make any sense at all. So being removed like that really, helps that scenario out.
But the fact is, for a lot of folks, especially folks who come here from out of town, it's like I was saying, when I worked at Sam's Club a few years ago, handing out samples of things, you'd have people on the weekends especially driving in from all corners of the state.
Yeah, absolutely.
And if somebody's driving 200 miles or 150 miles to get here, and they're not crazy about the way things are with the taxes or whatever, it's probably, having come that far, it's probably no big deal for them to think, well, I'll just go the extra 7 or 8 miles down the interstate here and get it in Bismarck.
Right. You know, and especially if you're coming here to buy $1,000 or $2,000 worth of supplies for the ranch or whatever, and you could get it in Bismarck or in Mandan, and like you said, now you can just go across the river and save a couple extra pennies on that.
Yeah. Again, the question is, how much of an effect can we reasonably expect it to have? And that is one area where I know I would like to see some solid research done.
I did some looking up of a couple of areas across the country, and one of them was the Maine and Vermont border.
Okay.
Maine had imposed a 1 cent sales tax over and above what Vermont charges. Okay.
Right.
And now the big box stores are building on the border. Now think about that. Yeah. They know that that an impact of 1% allows them to actually build stores. Now, of course, they have a greater population than we do.
I think Nevada, similar situation.
Yes. And then Cook County, which is where Chicago is located, had a very similar instance here a couple of years ago too, and to the point where they have lost revenue from their original sales tax because there are so many people that go across the border now to shop in other counties that it's actually impacting their regular budget.
Well, I know the state I come from, Delaware, my home state, is one of the handful of states with no sales tax. They call it Delaware the home of tax-free shopping. And we do get a lot of folks who drive down from Pennsylvania, from the Philadelphia area. Even though Philly has a multitude of great shopping complexes, Right up the road, in fact, another 10, 15 miles up the road, there's a place, area called King of Prussia, which a lot of folks have heard of, and which they've got an incredible layout. They've got a mall there that actually rivals the Mall of America.
That's pretty cool.
In size and everything. But there are a lot of folks, even from that area, that will drive down to Delaware 15, 20 miles
Sure.
just to save a little bit on the sales tax.
Right. And you think about that, and granted, we're not going to lose all of our retail sales in here, but if we lose
we're
five,
not predicting a disaster.
Right. Not at all.
We're not talking doomsday scenario.
Not at all. But it's enough to maybe impact a little bit of our budget, in what our sales tax dollars go to now. And, for future growth of Mandan. I mean, the one thing that I hear a lot about is, why can't we buy this and this and this in Mandan anymore? And I felt like in the last 4 or 5 years, we were starting to make some progress in that arena. There's a few more shops now in Mandan. And, if we just give, if a business is coming to the area and looking and saying, hey, should we locate in Bismarck or Mandan? If we just give that business, another reason to locate in Bismarck, I think that really impacts Mandan a lot.
Well, the conventional wisdom, and I'll tell you how it was for me when I first moved to this town. I live in Bismarck. My wife and I live on the north end of Bismarck. And when I first came to town, talking to the guy who brought me in when I worked at the radio station across town, the one across the river there.
Sure.
The guy who brought me in, who no longer lives and works here, he said something that I'm going to tell you what he said.
Sure.
Now, I'm not saying this. He said it when he was here 10 years ago.
Yep.
Okay, so save your nasty phone calls for him, not me. But basically what he said at the time was that, Bismarck's pretty good. He said, Mandan's kind of a dump, but Bismarck is a cool town.
Yep.
Speaking in terms of economy, and maybe it was at the time, I don't know. Although I never had that impression of Mandan. I mean, I drove over here my first time in Mandan expecting it would be destitute.
Right.
And while, yes, it is not as necessarily as affluent as some of the finer neighborhoods in Bismarck on the east side of the river, I wonder how much of that is a factor in getting people to come and do business in Mandan, and that being a factor, how much will that be affected by the hike in the sales tax?
Yeah, I mean, I think they're relative. I do.
Everything's relative.
Yep, it is.
I do not think Mandan is a dump, by the way.
I agree with you.
I did not say that. This other guy said it, and I'm not going to give his name out because I don't want people throwing rocks at his house. Even though he no longer lives here, he lives in St. Cloud, Minnesota, somewhere.
Well, I remember when we first moved here 25 years ago.
Yeah.
And we had some friends that lived in Bismarck when we were moving to Mandan, and the person that we were talking to, we're come on over to Mandan, and she's like, Mandan, and I'm like, yeah, come on over, let's have some coffee or something. I've never been to Mandan.
Really?
How do you? And she was like 50 years old at the time. I'm like, how do you live in a town for 50 years? And have never gone across the river.
Now that's weird.
It is weird, but she had the same thing. Her family just Mandan was a taboo place, and it
was the other side of the river,
so to speak,
literally and figuratively.
Absolutely. So
the other side of the tracks.
So we've had this image issue for a long time, which I feel like we're making a lot of progress on in Mandan, and I think in order to do that, you still have to have this fair playing ground, so to speak, of this taxation type of thing. The property taxes have gone up dramatically over the years in Mandan, and because of the equalization thing. So we're playing in a level playing field now, and if we go above that level playing field in Mandan, I think it impacts the community as a whole.
We're talking about the proposal, which is coming up for a vote June the 9th. The proposal for a hike in the sales tax for the city of Mandan, 3/4 of a penny per dollar. How much of an effect will that have? That's what we're talking about. How would it affect you living in Mandan or Bismarck, for that matter, if you want to shop in Mandan? 663-1270, our remaining moments with Marlo Anderson. In just a few moments here at Super Talk 1270 and supertalk1270.com.
Right now, 55.
Get the app called Radio Pup for your iPhone and take us everywhere you go. Bismarck and Mandan's own Super Talk 1270.
This hour has flown by. We're talking about the proposal. Well, it has.
It has flown by.
This has been fun. We've been talking about the proposal for a hike in the sales tax for Mandan, coming up for a vote for a referendum, if you will, June the 9th, 3/4 of a cent per dollar sales tax hike in order to pay for this proposed new sports complex, which would include a hockey arena, gymnastic facilities, new football and track field, conversion of one football and track field into ball fields. Right?
Yep. So that would be Ferris Field that would
Ferris
actually
Field,
get converted to softball fields.
And we got time to take some calls if you want to call in, 663-1270. But again, let me pose a question. I'll give out the number again. If you live in Mandan, how do you feel about this? If you live in Bismarck, how much would this affect you in your decision to shop in the Mandan area? Again, the number is 663-1270. I think that to me is the key question. And I don't really know how much it would affect the area.
Yeah, it's
there would
hard
have
to
to
say.
be some kind of research conducted, or at the very least, try to find a precedent. Look at other communities in similar situations that have done something similar, and how it affected them. At the very least, I would like to see some research on that done.
I think the fact that it's June 9th, getting local research together to prove the point one way or the other.
6 weeks away now.
It would be very difficult to do that.
Yeah.
So you'd have to take...
Not impossible, though.
Not impossible.
Not impossible. By any means.
I think the better approach would be to take precedent from other communities.
Yeah.
That have sister
That'd be
cities.
the easy thing, and that wouldn't be that hard.
Wouldn't be too hard. Sister counties, sister
Yeah.
states, and see how, I gave a couple examples of, like Cook County and Maine and Vermont.
I know for a fact there are people at the local colleges and the business and research departments who, you could hook up with, and they would help you.
That would be interesting to do, actually. You're right. That's a good idea, Jim. We should probably do that.
There's one lady, she was one of my professors over at Mary.
Yep.
Who's in charge of who teaches research and statistics over there, and she would be ideal for something like this.
Yeah, we may have to reach out to them and see if they're willing to do something.
Absolutely. Yep. The other thing I wanted to mention, again, in fairness to the folks on the other side of this issue, I think it's reasonable to assume that Marlo here is on the nay side of this issue, that it's not that you have a problem with a new sports complex.
I don't have a problem with any of this.
You just have some questions about how this thing is going to be bankrolled.
That's correct.
And whether the hike in the sales tax, as small as it may sound, is going to do more harm than good.
Right.
In affecting the way people come to do business in Mandan.
Yep.
I mean, Mandan is not a dump by any means, as my old boss described it many years ago. But it's also, it's got some issues to deal with economically.
Right, and it would be nice to have that level playing field, with Bismarck. So when we're trying to recruit businesses to the community of Mandan, that they just don't look at Bismarck and say, "Hey, I already have a built-in advantage by going there."
And we are going to have the folks on from the other side.
Yes.
We tried to get them today. You tried to get a couple of guys.
I did.
Know.
Yes.
They had some kind of press conference today.
They have a press.
Right?
Yeah, that was scheduled during the same time as the show. As a matter of fact, so they
but
just
we
didn't
will
want
have them on the show. I mean, they are certainly welcome to come on the show.
Love to have
and
them
get
on
off
the
their
show.
Position. Yeah.
Yep, because I think it's important. This is an important thing to debate.
Yeah.
And I've gone to a couple of the meetings. I wanted them to convince me that this was the right thing to do.
Yeah.
For
I do
me,
think
they have
that the
not.
burden of proof is on them. My general philosophy is, when it comes to taxes, that the burden of proof is always on the people who want to raise the taxes.
Right. And again, hats off to them for the work that they've put into this. They're doing this because they want to better Mandan as well.
That's fine.
And
Sure.
I have no problem with that, of course. I'm extremely involved in the community, have been for many years, and I'm all for bettering our community. But again, this to me just isn't the right way to do this.
Yeah, we're talking about a $22 million sports complex.
Right.
And that, for a town the size of Mandan, I would think $22 million is a lot of money.
Well, and it's again not just the sports complex. It's the football field and the track. The gymnastics center will be revamped, and they haven't come out with a location, to my knowledge, yet.
I was going to ask you about that. Where are we going to put this thing?
They have a couple locations put out, and they haven't decided on anything yet. Of course,
Do you think maybe you'd feel better about it if they did have a location picked out?
I think it would help a little
bit.
bit.
Some more of their ducks in a row on this?
Because I think it would, right now they're not really sure how much it's going to cost. They have an idea, but it can vary a lot depending on land acquisition and that type of thing that goes into that.
That, I think, is what makes people nervous when you say, well, we want to do this. It's a great thing. We think it'd be kind of, sort of, when they start getting vague about things. I think that's what makes people nervous.
Yep. And I think that, but I guess in my opinion, even if they had a location picked out, if they were using the sales tax thing, I would still be against it. The only way I would not be against this is if Bismarck was at the same level. You know what I mean? So
economically, size-wise.
Well, and the sales tax thing.
Yeah.
If Bismarck were to come out and say, we're going to raise our sales tax by 0.75% or 1%, then I would feel comfortable moving forward with increasing our sales tax. But in the opposite realm, I just don't see that possibility.
Well, for the folks who are in favor of this, I think what works in their favor is the fact that sometimes it's hard to really get into people's heads how the math really adds up on this. You say 0.75 of a penny per dollar. Well, that's really not that much.
Not a lot.
Not for $1.
Right.
But if you're paying a couple of $1,000s for something, like if you go right down the street here, one of the home improvement places along the way here, $2,000-3,000 for a new fireplace or a new spa in the backyard or whatever, you're talking some serious bucks.
Yeah,
there.
it does add up.
And that's where it does add up.
And I think the other thing that's kind of the challenge is that I think we have a little tax fatigue going on right now. I mean, we are living in the most prosperous state in the country right now.
For the moment, yes.
And I mean that may
Knock
change,
wood.
of course, right?
Knock wood.
But we are blessed to be where we're at.
Yes.
And how is it that our taxes across the board continue to go up? It doesn't make a whole lot of sense to anybody, I don't think. And I think that has a lot to do with, I like I said, I put that little poll out there on Facebook a while back, and I just think it's like, the people have this attitude of, are you kidding me?
Yeah.
Another tax increase?
Well, nobody wants to pay more taxes,
right.
No matter what they're paying. If they're paying, penny per $100, they're going to gripe about that.
Right, that's exactly correct.
Yeah.
Yep. So I think they're kind of dealing with that a little bit too. And again, I'd love to see this project move forward. We just have to figure out a different way to fund it.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And we talked about, again, recap very briefly the idea that you had as an alternative.
Well, what I'd like to see is a cap put on the sales tax that we bring in now. So that 1% sales tax that we have coming in now, we've had about a $1.5 million increase.
You're saying a cap on the tax?
Well, not so much a cap, I guess, but you pick a number, and that number, and I'll just say, right now we bring in about $2.8 million in the city of Mandan.
Okay.
So that's gone up about $1.5 million in the last 5 or 6 years.
Okay.
So let's say we pick a number of $1.5 million, and that money goes to our street repairs and that type of thing. Okay. And then
it's earmarked. Okay.
Right, earmarked for that. Okay. Anything that we bring in over the $1.5 million, so that $1.3 million that there would be right now would go to this project. And then as the city grows, then that number might go to $2 million to $3 million, whatever, in the future, and that would actually allow this to get paid off quicker in the whole bit.
Good morning. You're on Super Talk 1270. We have a call. Hi there.
Hi. I just want to let you guys know, I'm feeling the same way about these taxes. I moved to Mandan about 10 years ago, and I'm ready to sell my house and move back to Bismarck.
Yeah, I remember a time when it was dirt. You could buy a house for next to nothing in this town, but that's kind of a different story.
Yep.
And then since Central Market closed downtown, I don't even shop groceries no more in Mandan. I go straight to Bismarck to casualize.
Okay.
And mainly we do probably 95% of our shopping in Bismarck. I don't even want to shop in Mandan the way they're so greedy with everything.
I appreciate your input, sir. You've made some good points. I think your feelings reflect the feelings of a lot of people in this community.
Yep, and I know in the last 10 years since I've been here, I can name probably 20 families that sold their homes and moved to Bismarck.
I see. Thank you very much for the call, sir. Good luck to you.
Yep.
Thank you. Super Talk 1270, we got just a couple of minutes. We got about 2 minutes left. Enough time for a very quick phone call if somebody wants to squeeze one in here at 663-1270. But I'll give you time for your closing comments here, Marlo.
Sure. Well, I appreciate being on the air and you giving me a chance to vent a little bit here today, Jim. So, and again, I wish the people who've put this project together all the best with this. I think that It's a great thing for the community. We just have to figure out another way to fund it. And I think there's some opportunities to do that without increasing our sales tax revenue that are in our sales tax that we have coming into the community right now. I mean, that's the bottom line to it, Jim.
So it's more a question of how it's going to be bankrolled.
Right.
How we're going to pay for this, where the money's going to come from, and is everything going to hold up the way it should?
Yeah, exactly.
Financially.
Yep. So,
Alrighty.
all right.
Well, thank you, Marlo Anderson, weighing in on the proposed sales tax hike for the city of Mandan. The referendum is coming up on June the 9th. I promise between now and then we'll have more to say on this subject.
Okay.
And we will make every effort to get the folks on the other side of this argument on the show to talk about it from their perspective.
Yep, that'd be
because
great.
that's only reasonable.
Yeah, absolutely.
And your comments welcome. SuperTalk1270.com. Jim Walsh here for SuperTalk 1270 and SuperTalk1270.com. Have a good day. Thanks for listening.